What's up, y'all? Champ Ron, the Minding Your Business podcast. Friday, December the 13th, 2019, coming to you live as we always do. And we're going to get right into it with today's guest. Of course, the podcast is brought to you by the Binge Podcast Network. Binge.com is where you need to check out all the great content and podcast providers that we have. Shout out to Let's Be Real. It's great seeing that whole team this past weekend at Podbox 3, which was hosted by Ida Esco of the Verbally Effective podcast that you need to go check out. It's also great to see my guy Dominic Lawson and his wife Kenda with Owls LLC and the Startup Life podcast. So make sure y'all check that out at alldaybinge.com. You can get your Minding Your Business tees, your graphic tees. There's no business like minding your own. You can get those at themybpodcast.com/shop. Today's guest is Mr. Chris Tabish. He is the co-founder of Venture West Consulting in Silicon Valley and also the author of the book Comediology, which we definitely want to get into because we want to hear some more about that and how that ties to business. But for many years, he has been one of the innovators from there on the West Coast, and him and his team working to help companies level up their business processes and their various channels to be the very best that they can be so they can deliver for their customers and for their employees. And so it's great to have Chris on. Chris, are you there?
Ron, I'm here. Great to be here. Thanks for the great introduction. Yeah, good to be on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Chris. I appreciate you taking time, man. So, man, we're going to dive right in because we've got people here waiting. They're giving their thumbs up and their 100s. And so looks like you guys are on the ball today with the MYB community. So I'm excited. Looks like they're excited. So let's get into it.
Awesome. Let's do it.
All right. So, Chris, tell us about how you got into business. Obviously, we all had our start, right? And seems like you had a very unique start to your life and kind of getting into business. So, walk us through, how you got your start.
Yeah, well, it all started when I, got through with school, and I realized that I wasn't being picked up by Warner Brothers anytime soon. So, it's kind of funny,
right?
I actually, at that point in time when I was young and I was like, okay, you got to make money. My degree was in accounting because accounting is, hey, you'll always have a job. I mean, literally, that's one of the reasons I chose accounting. And I absolutely hate accounting. And so it was one of those things that, like, maybe you could make money out of it, but you would be miserable. But back then, I didn't think about stuff like that. And so, that kind of grew and morphed into consulting and working with computers. And I actually, deep down, I think I actually enjoyed it. But I was living to a North Star of be secure. I mean, maybe I'm like a reincarnated 1920s Great Depression person. I don't know.
Right.
But that's what I was living towards. And so, that was the initial basis of my career. Now it's since kind of thankfully gotten to where I'm driving towards different things. But yeah, that was the start of it. And so, out of that came consulting and things that I do still to this day.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Chris, as you're transitioning through that, you get your start in corporate America. So what were you doing, and how did that transition for you?
Yeah, so initially I started out in consulting, like the big five, or it used to be the big eight, and there have been a couple of Enrons along the way. So it's like the big four, big five, but so like Accenture and Deloitte, and then I was spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley, pretty much working on computer systems. So, for example, I was director of applications at Symantec, which worked like Norton Antivirus and those types of applications. And then I was working at Juniper Networks, so I was on the CIO staff there. So a lot of responsibility, a lot of stress. Enjoyable work, but it was definitely moving as quick as you can to get the next technology up and running. Since that point in time, I've jumped off, and now I have, as you mentioned, Venture West Consulting, which is my own consulting business, which will kind of do the same things, but we, I'll say, bring in a little bit more levity, a little more fun, a little more, why are you doing what you're doing? What's the goal? system because it's the latest technology.
Right. So instead of being kind of like task oriented, which sometimes can be typical in corporate America, right, where you're just given one task after the other. Sometimes there's not always a soul or a meaning into that. It sounds like your consulting firm then is able to add some of the why, some of the like you mentioned, some of the fun, and then the ability to kind of dig beneath the surface. And I imagine your internal culture is probably much different than what you found in corporate America as well.
Yeah, Ron, you nailed it. I mean, that's, I think, one of the, and just to bring in comediology, a lot of that is, because I do stand up on the side, and that's bringing that lesson in, because you can't go on stage in comedy, and I used to do this, I used to memorize lines and regurgitate, for lack of a better term.
Right.
Sorry for those of you who hadn't breakfast yet. It doesn't work when you just memorize a line and throw it on stage. It doesn't come across. It doesn't resonate with the audience. It wasn't until in comedy that I learned why I was there. And why I was there is because I love connecting with people. I love connecting with people. I love bringing joy to people. And what was missing from work. And so you're spot on. And I was doing things because upper management told me to implement Salesforce. It's like, I don't know why we're doing it.
Right.
And if you don't know why you're doing something, it's really hard to be successful. If you know, for example, implementing Salesforce, well, that could look different to a lot of people.
Right.
If you know that you're there to bring joy to people and connect with people, you can do that right away. You don't need to wait for a technology. A technology will enhance that, but boy, what a difference. So yeah, and I think that's what I was doing, and I saw a lot of other people doing as well, Ron, exactly what you said, just doing things because that's what upper management did, or that's what other people are doing.
Right, exactly. And so, Chris, as you transition to that, tell me about those early days with Venture West. Did you, and your other co-founders, did you take kind of a collection of your corporate experience and kind of merge that together and say, here's what we want to do? Or did you guys kind of come from different backgrounds and you kind of had this merger hodgepodge of different ideologies and things like that? Tell us about how that came together and, how either seamless it was or maybe how rocky it was in the beginning, or kind of walk us through that piece of it.
Yeah, so initially, like I said, I was working at large Fortune 500 Silicon Valley companies, and I was in their IT department, which is Latin for lack of joy. If you're wondering.
Yep, I see that for sure.
So I was pretty miserable. I felt like, and I don't know, I'm sure you felt this way. I felt this way. I know a lot of people, that the walls start closing in. And all of a sudden you feel like, I don't have any options. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I'm making a paycheck and I'm dependent on that paycheck. Even though you might be saving money, you're just like, this is the path for me. And so I felt really stuck. And, I had a choice. I could either, literally, Ron, it was to this point, I was like, well, I could go, see a counselor, or I could go do comedy. And the difference is the people in the audience, don't have my employee number. So
right. I was gonna say, what's the difference between the two?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and what I found was, and it was a really interesting lesson for me, doing something that brought me joy that seemed completely unrelated to work. Like, how's comedy gonna help me get ahead in my career? But it got me thinking out of the box. It got me in a land of creativity versus compliance and cost restraint, and thinking about ideas and how I could do things, and quite frankly, taking risks and finding my voice. That's one thing that comedy really helps you do, is you can't go on stage and just like, well, what do you people think?
Right.
You gotta go up and like, this is what I think about dogs. This is what I think about what happened to me yesterday. And so having an opinion helped me bring that back into my professional career. And so it's like, yeah, I don't like doing this as an employee. I want to do this as a consultant. I think there are things that I can bring to the table that I couldn't do as an employee. And so Ron, you asked about that transition. It wasn't as bumpy as it would have been had I not brought in something else that brought me joy to give me that courage, to give me that lift. From there, I won't say it was easy, but it was a blast because I was out there doing what I loved.
Yeah, exactly. Today our guest, Chris Tabish, here on the Mind Your Business podcast. And quick shout out to everybody here on Facebook Live. I see Steve, Warnett, Lenoris, Yasmin, Eric, Solomon, Don, everybody. I see you all here on Spreaker. I see you on Facebook Live. So I just want to shout out everybody real quick. So Chris, you kind of dived into what I was going to ask about comediology. And it sounded like you were beginning to kind of describe how you're tying comedy into business. But how did comediology come about as you're tying this in? And as you did this, did you find any pushback internally as you're growing the company? So in those early years and even today, do you find there's pushback or a lot of adherence to creating that type of culture internally with your company?
Yeah, Ron, now maybe I just haven't heard it back to me yet.
No, they just didn't tell you. Right.
Let me know what your Facebook listeners are saying.
Right.
I would say the biggest pushback is me internally.
Yeah.
I've had a career being very left brain, being very analytical, and then all of a sudden, hey, I'm bringing in this right brain, very creative world, and it's like, oh, what are you doing? That's dumb. What are you doing? People aren't going to understand. I got to tell you, people were as desperate for me to have some spot of joy in their life as I was, and that's what I'm finding. And I'm sure, if some people might object to it, and I won't say I'm not irreverent in a corporate situation with comedy, but bringing it into very, mindfully, and it's the principles that go along with comedy. I mean, I'm not saying, hey, get up in the boardroom and start making fun of the CEO.
Yeah, I was gonna say, please, NYB, nobody does do that. Yeah, nobody needs to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
And their best won't work.
Right, exactly.
But I think, for me it was, just bringing in those concepts into a corporate context. I found that those lessons were, after I started the business and started feeling that, hey, this comedy had a real impact to that. That's when I thought, well, what if I could document that and help other people? Because, oh my gosh, I was miserable. And if I could help somebody else through that, what a gift, what a joy to bring that. So I found positive feedback so far, but let me know what you get back.
Right. Yeah, no, we're getting some laughs and some thumbs up and hundreds and everything else popping up here, Chris. And so tell me about how it helps people. So I definitely get, the connection and bringing it into the business culture. How are you then taking that into people who haven't been exposed to your culture and getting them to adopt something like comedy, into their perspective and their psyche as they're operating their business?
Yeah, I think the first one is just awareness. Just, I go and I might give an hour presentation just about comedy, making people realize that this is an actual tool. It isn't something just for the food workers and the unemployed. I mean, this is something that you can actually...
Right.
And let me give you an example, Ron. So this is actually, it has science behind it. They did this study where, they had people watch this video, and the video was a snippet of some things were funny, some things weren't funny, and then on the side they were video patching in another person. And sometimes this person would laugh at the same time. You would laugh at a funny video, sometimes they wouldn't laugh. And
right.
Different people sort of, rotated in. At the end, they said, who do you like? Who do you want to be affiliated with? And hands down, it was those people that they were laughing together. Well, the funny thing was, they weren't even actually live people. They were just video clips, pasted in at the right time. But that's the power that comedy has. When we're laughing together, we're like, I mean, Ron, just you and me, laughing, man, Ron's a great guy. We see eye to eye, and we can do business. And as well as I do, well, do you have that connection? Oh man, it's like the issue's like, hey, Ron, we got an issue. Well, I understand. Ron and I get Ron, he gets me. It's so much easier to do business. And so realizing that that's a tool, first and foremost, can make your business flow so much easier. Find ways that you can connect. Find ways that you can be humble, tell a story about yourself that is self-deprecating, oh man, it just opens the doors, realizing that you're not just showing up saying, I'm confident and I can carry a 4. What about you? You know, that's just being
right, right.
Having fun with people. So that I think is the first and step. And then there are actually steps that you can do. But I'm going to pause there because I've been talking a lot. But does that make sense? That
No,
first step is for awareness.
No, it makes great sense. And I see the connectivity. And oftentimes when you're taught, even in, say like communications or speech, you're taught, you get into kind of an icebreaker of using comedy. Often here in America, other cultures may not value this quite as much, but in America, we value comedy, particularly in a speaking form. So most people have an icebreaker that involves some sort of joke or something to lighten the mood, get everybody comfortable. And so that's why I was thinking as you were explaining that. And then also when you talk about doing business with people, there's two things that jump out with that, Chris, which is trust and likability. And so when you develop the trust from oftentimes the likability, and the likability comes from, like you said, your ability to demonstrate that you're a normal human being and a regular person and not just an entity or not just someone that's representing a brand logo. And so when you can touch the human heart, and one of the ways that you can do that is through comedy. And so it makes a lot of sense when you're building your business and you're building relationships, which is really all that it's about, and fostering those relationships. There are a lot of people that are just kind of, there's so much about business and everything's about how they're going to make the next sale that they forget that they're dealing with human beings.
So well put, Ron. And I think, I think we walk into situations, at least I did, I better prove I'm confident. I better prove I can, and it's like,
right.
You don't need to prove that. And in fact, the more that you come across and you try to prove that, the more it kind of turns people off versus we assume you're confident. You wouldn't be at the table if you weren't, if you didn't know how to if you didn't know how to Google and get the answer.
Right.
So we assume that already, but then when you're like, wow, they're likable and they're cool, like, wow, and it's been another study that came out. If we can see that about you, we can see you're likable. We, as your team, will do anything we can to boost you up to help you get on the same confidence level if you happen to be lacking in that area. So,
right.
and likewise, if you're not likable, that was the wrong answer.
Right.
So you're spot on.
Yep, absolutely. So let me ask you this, Chris, because some people may look at this and they may think, well, my natural personality is not of comedy, right? I'm a person that's a pretty dry personality or pretty rigid personality. May look at it and say, well, I'm not really big so much on the fun and games and that sort of thing. What would you say to that, Chris, if you were coaching that individual that's, running an organization and maybe they're the old school madmen, smoke in the office, everybody get back to work, what are you looking at type of guy? You know what I mean? What the hell am I paying you people for? That guy. What would you say to that guy if you're coaching him?
Hang on, let me put down my gin and tonic while I answer that.
Right. Right, exactly.
So I think, when you look at comedy, and I would think it's a lot of people look at the end result, like, hey, did it make me laugh? Did it make somebody laugh? Or they look at, Seinfeld or, Eddie Murphy or these like, hey, that's a comedy, and that's what you got to bring into the office. So what I'm saying is that's the end result. And just like anything else, if you let's just say if you exercise, one thing that you might want to do a marathon. Well, maybe a marathon isn't your thing. Maybe you want to be a power lifter. Maybe you want to be a skier. Comedy's the same thing. A lot of people, rather than look at the end result, look at the things that bring you comedy, because those are the same things that will bring you success in business. And specifically what I'm talking about is being authentic, or being present. If you walk into a meeting and you're still stressed out about what happened the day before, you're probably not going to be present, being able to work through situations. Just likewise being, present on stage.
Right.
You're going to have a successful comedy team. You're present. Another one is learning how to fail. Right. Is getting over yourself. So in comedy, if I'm thinking about if I tell a joke and believe it or not all of my jokes make people laugh.
Right. Of course not.
So you're like, oh, I just bombed that joke. Well, if you're thinking about that, and you're like, I'm a horrible comedian. People don't like me. Guess what? Your energy is gonna be sucked up in that past moment. If you can get over yourself, that's when you can start figuring out in the present moment a solution. Why wasn't it funny? How can I be funny? What can I do differently? And well, likewise in business, it doesn't mean you have to be funny or not. It's the principles behind those being comedy that I'm talking about in Comediology that really make a difference in business, that help us be fulfilled and have fun and can bring us to success. Does that make sense?
No, it makes great sense because and here's why I say that, because again, we talked about doing business being relationship based. It's about trust and likability. It's also about self-reflection and self-awareness, and that you can recognize and quickly pivot is what I hear with that. That's one of the things that's helped me, and I think it's helped you, and I think it's helped a lot of people who are successful to however they measure success, Chris, is that they got the ability to quickly pivot and be introspective. And I think comedy helps tie us to that introspective nature. If you think of like a Dave Chappelle or like you mentioned, some of the comedian kind of greats. One they do is they lighten the mood, they take risk. Obviously Dave Chappelle takes a lot of risk, especially in his Netflix special recently. But he's able to tie that into some of his self-reflection, and because he's willing to take some of those risks and put it out there, it mimics a lot of the skill set that you have to be successful in business. And so I love, how you tied that in around the introspective nature that you have with comedy, going back and reflecting, okay, how can I be better at this? Even if something does work and gets a lot of laughs, how can I improve it? How can I streamline it? How can I make the punchline tougher? Or, maybe I hit the punchline a little earlier, or maybe I add this part, to the presentation. Same when you're presenting in a business setting, you go back and you reflect. And I think it ties on those skill sets and it kind of lightens those skill sets in terms of squarely, how can I get better at it, as opposed to kicking yourself and saying, oh, I screwed this up, I screwed that up, I'm not going to get the deal, I'm not going to get the relationship, and all these negative thoughts come into play. I think comedy helps lessen the load. It allows people to, be introspective, but then also understand that they're still living. They still got, they still have another opportunity. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, death by PowerPoint. It was still able to move on. So I love how you make that tie-in.
Yeah, and Ron, you said it well. I mean, it's that introspection. And so one of the specific things I talk about and suggest for my clients is, okay, so let's take people who have a job and have, heard about saving for their future. So when you start saving for your future, you're like, you get your first paycheck, making up the dollars. Let's say, you get a paycheck for $500, and then you save. You're like, I'm gonna save $5, and you're like, oh man, like what's this gonna do? Like when I get, when I retire, I'm gonna be able to buy like 15 minutes at a parking meter. Like,
right.
Really, this is really gonna help me. And so,
right.
But over time, obviously, if you save month after month after month after month, well, over time, that's gonna be your foundation,
right?
And that's gonna be how you make a living, and when you retire, that's going to be what you withdraw from. Well, the same thing is true for being creative or being introspective, or in my case, being a comedian. Is that, and I call this the creative 401k. So just like you invest month after month into a financial to your financial future, that's the same thing in building out something that you really love to do. I wake up early and I write down comedy. First thing I do when I get up in the morning. And so the first time I write it, it's horrible. It's like, right. Oh my God, really? This is I'm a horrible comedian, and then you go through it. And then after day, 6 and day 8 and day 10, it's like, you know what, this is pretty good. I want to go on stage with this. And then over, in my case, writing the book, it took 3 years to write it.
Right.
Once I learned, like a computer and stuff. No, but that's the same thing. thing. Like it forces you to be introspective, it forces you to reflect. It forces, and then you start building something that you actually feel really confident about, and you can get out there and start doing that. People are asking like, well, that's great. You're a comedian, and we tend to think about people who are just that way, quote unquote, and you're like, they're just good at that. Well,
right.
They're actually really building that up and then all of a sudden, wow, you are good at that. So anyway, so one thing that you were talking about that it helps you think about it, it helps you become introspective, and it helps you build a craft is that I call creative 401k.
That's a great term. I'll jot that one down. Because I may have to use it in my comedy special. I mean, but so Chris, let's get into it as we're kind of wrapping this thing up. Take me to one of your tough days. And I always like to ask people in business, entrepreneurs, this question is, take me to one of your toughest days in business. I know you had plenty of them in corporate America, but take me through as you're starting the business, what was your toughest day? And that day that you almost said, hey, you know what? I'm gonna quit this and I'm gonna go back to corporate America, right? Or I'm gonna go back to this, or I'm gonna go do that. If you had that day, and walk us through kind of how it came to be and what allowed you to keep going. Because I think, those are the times where the character's really revealed. And then, you could go back and say, you know what? I was kicked in the teeth or I was knocked to my knees, but I kept going. And I think people listening to this podcast, as they round up 2019, they're looking at 2020. Maybe this year wasn't one of their better years, or things didn't go as expected, or there was losses, there was things that didn't come through they thought they would, or maybe there was health or whatever it is. So walk us through that time if you had it. And if you did, Chris, again, share with us what got you over the hump.
So I think, Ron, the toughest day of mine was actually when I was still in corporate America, and okay. I was thinking about this business, and I've been talking to people, anybody who's ever like, I'm going to do this, and they haven't yet done it, because I was talking about starting my own business, and then 1 year goes by, 2 years go by, and people like, hey, Chris, you still going to start that business of yours? And you're like, look at that Griffin. You're like, right. You just feel like a loser because you haven't yet done it.
Right.
And so I was working, and I have 3 kids, and I have a wife. I have 5 mouths to feed. I'm the breadwinner, and I felt so much pressure. And I was just working I happened to be, my boss was, I was, helping out with clients, and one of the clients came to me, and they looked at me, and this guy wasn't, I'll say, he didn't stick to his promises, didn't have complete integrity. But I was like, well, I've worked with the clients, I can sort of, mask that because I have integrity, and, it doesn't matter so much because they don't have a direct relationship. Well, one of the clients came to me, looked me right in the eyes and said, why are you working for somebody who doesn't have integrity? And, after I was able to get up off the floor, I was right. Like, you teach dead people food, and it really struck me, Ron. It was a question of my integrity, because I know he hadn't been treating other employees right. I know he hadn't been treating customers right, partners, and it was like, I need to do something. And I felt pretty low. I felt like I was like, but I'm still doing this because I'm living out of fear. That's what it came down to, because I really had to look at myself in the mirror. And so that was the catalyst. I said, you know what, I'm going to start this new business. That's what helped me. I literally quit the next week. I didn't have a client. I didn't have I'd been thinking about it for a while, so I had a plan, but I didn't yet have any revenue stream.
Wow.
That was in 2016. And it took me about 3 months. I got clients. I got my first client. I've had subsequent clients, and knock on wood, it's just been really good since then. And so I'm just, it's one of those things in life that it gets handed to you. And I think that's the realization, is when we're handed a challenge, is that in retrospect, it's a gift. When you're looking at it straight in the eyes, you're like, oh my God, seriously, why did this have to come? But that's what helped me get through, is that ability to realize I was living out of fear. and the courage to move forward and jump in a different direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, you touched on something. You and I, we didn't even know this. We had a similar background. I've got three kids as well, and my wife and I have been together. It'll be 13 years in June, and I've got three girls.
You want a couple more kids on?
Well, no, I was actually going to say, I mean, I think with free 2-day shipping, I can get mine over to you before Christmas. I think I can get them out to Silicon Valley on 2-day shipping. I have to check my Amazon Prime. I can send you some beautiful girls. But
I hope nobody listens to that piece out of context.
Yeah, I was gonna say that can be, you can easily splice that and turn it into whatever you want. But so
and bring them to me. Okay, we're
right. Yep, exactly. So, how did your wife and your kids support you in that transition? Because, some people hear that, and when you talk about fear, one of the fears would be is to leave corporate America and not have any income. And how did that conversation go with your wife? And, how was she supportive in helping you develop to where you are today?
Well, it's great question, Ron. It's when, when I talked about that creative 401k, when I first brought it up to my wife, I hadn't done my homework. I hadn't really focused on any plan. And so she's like, I'm not too comfortable with that.
Right.
But building it, and then once you build something and you put it on paper, and I truly believe that's the key, because you're taking something that is in your mind and is in the ether, and you're putting it into reality on paper.
Right.
When you start to put it on paper, you start to talk about it. It starts to become a real manifestation in this world. And over time, she could see it. She could see the plan. And it was tangible for her. It took her, those 1 to 3 years of manifestation. She started to see that, and she started to get comfortable. When I was ready, she's like, you got to do it. You could go for it. But
right.
Because I had the confidence in myself, and she could see that. So it's a great question, and it was a journey. It wasn't like, okay, go ahead.
Right.
Like Top Ramen, So,
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it was the same for me. In my transition, actually next month will be 2 years since my transition out of corporate America. And I'll say this, because my background's in banking, and Chris, very similar. I had to learn that very quickly, that by putting it in writing, it allowed it to be tangible for my wife, and then that allowed her to have something to support. And MYB, one of the things I'd like for you to take away from what Chris and I are saying is, when you have those type of transitions, or you're looking to build a business and you're concerned about family and friends and all that type of stuff and their support, one of the things that will help you is not just verbalizing what you're going to do, but putting it in writing and show them. And that allows them to have some skin in the game and to be able to support. But too often what we do is we just come with verbalization. We say, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And it's got really no value, because all it is just words, right? And so by putting it, like Chris said, what he did was put it into some kind of context with some kind of plan that shows people that you've given it some real thought. It's not just a flavor of the day or flavor of the week or of the month. It's not because you're feeling sorry for yourself because of your previous situation. It's you show the leadership by putting it in paper and say, hey, I've given this some thought. What do you see? And, can I get your buy-in and support for what I'm doing? And what I've always found is, whether it's a spouse or whoever it is they end up getting involved and in some cases become partners in a lot of ways with what you're doing. So for those of you, no matter what walk that you're on right now, take heed to what Chris is saying, because it's a big part. I think it hinders a lot of people. Whether you're in, no matter what status of relationship that you're in or whatever it is, put it in paper, even if it's just for yourself, because you'll believe it more if you write it down and have it out there. You can get behind it and gear your emotions around it. So, Chris, thanks for sharing that, man, because I think that's really good best practice for people to take away.
Yeah, Ron, and I like how you put that, because I think particularly in America, we get so brainwashed of looking at something that, hey, they're an overnight success. you know, you see all of a sudden a new face or a new book or a new YouTube video, whatever, and you're like, oh, they just did that and they're successful. Well, it's not. It's starting out very small and just with writing something down, and because there's a script that goes behind that movie that was an overnight success that took years to develop, but we don't see that, and so in our minds we just think, hey, it was overnight, and they're just born that way, or they're just this way. But
right.
Putting in the time, being about your paper, and it's amazing the transformation that you'll see in retrospect, and it's not easy to see up front because you just think it's small. Or no one, I wouldn't have thought in a million years that I could take my comedy and apply it to something that in business and actually have success. I just never would have dreamt that. But day after day, building that over time, and I'm sure, Ron, similar to you, that like now you're reaching out to thousands of people and you're
right.
making a difference, and it probably I'd be curious if you think that when you first started this.
Yeah, no, I did. When I first started, and having been in banking, I thought initially it'd be easy because I had a Rolodex full of folks that I could just call. But I was just calling and verbalizing, hey, this is what I'm doing, and this is kind of what happened, and and people are like, yeah, okay, that's cool, But it wasn't until I started sending out proposals and I put together prospect letters and doing some different things that now people are able to kind of get behind, what I'm doing. And they started offering up ideas and here's some best practices. Ron, why don't you try this or why don't you try that? Reaching out to people that, who I wanted to do business with, as opposed to just, the machine gun approach of just standing up and just whatever I hit, I get. Specifically, who do I want to do business with? You know what I mean? Because a lot of times, young entrepreneurs, you know what I mean, Chris? They like to just, another crude, comedy joke. They just like to stand up on the building and just fire, right? And then whatever they hit is what they hit, and they hope they hit what they want. But at the end of the day, what you got to do is go after specifically what you want and who you want to do business with. I call that the DNA of the type of person that you want to get with. And there's a certain DNA that you will covet and that you want to make sure you're doing business with, and then you go find those people. And so that's what happened to me over time. But like you said earlier, that took time, that took development, and so you got to put yourself around the right type of people, consume the right type of content, and like you do with Comediology, you got to incorporate a little humor into it. I mean, I did that too. That kept me from being bitter about what happened in the past, or like you said, why you go on the social media timeline and this person's doing this and you're not, and our world has become so connected to that and disconnected at the same time. We've connected with other people better through social media, but then we've disconnected from them as well. And we use people just to stack rank where we are in life and how old am I compared to that person, and why is this and why is that, and my mama didn't do this or my daddy didn't do, as we start coming up with a lot of some reasons and some excuses. But so I learned to just kill all of that off, man, and just focus in on me and my family and what I need to do. And like you said, break things down into its common form, and then celebrate those small wins. And no matter how, even if it's just getting through a 10-minute presentation, come out, hey, I got through that. That was a win in itself. Now let me go on to the next step. And then, continuous improvement of myself and being open and transparent with customers and prospects. It'll come. It takes time. And I share with you MYB, like Chris was saying, Avengers Endgame, right, that sold billions of dollars. Someone wrote that script probably 10 years ago. It wasn't like they just showed up with Robert Downey Jr. and said, okay, come on, we're just gonna make a movie, and hey, here, read the script, and we'll figure out everything else, after it's done. This was something that was in the works. I mean, even the first Iron Man, I think came out in 2008. I mean, they started talking to Robert Downey Jr., at the turn of the century. It takes time for those things to come out. Yeah, exactly. I mean, so it just takes time, and so I encourage people that, understand that it can take time to build. It's kind of like the 10 or 15 year, overnight success. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, man.
100%. And go ahead, Ron.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things when you said just let it go and break it down, I think a lot of people, you're right. It does take time, and some people out there might be like, well, what is my thing? You know, I mean, because for me, comedy, I love comedy. Ron, for you, you love talking, and you have a great voice for getting people involved. Maybe, and people might think that's just who you are naturally or who I am naturally. But I don't know what my thing is. One of the things that I just as another tool for your listeners that they can start doing, and again on the lines of writing it down, is just what I call a 30-minute rant. And what you can do is, because everybody has this editor, right? Like, it's not good enough, that's dumb, you're not going to be, there's other people doing it, it's too competitive, whatever it is, to let that stuff go. And it's not easy just to say, let it go, find your space. So sitting and writing down 30 minutes and do this every day. And what I mean is you just write down whatever comes to your mind. It's not going to be good. Don't worry about a period or a comma or a punctuation or a capital. Just write it down. It's going to be like gobbledygook. And that's the point. Is whatever comes to your mind, write it down. After 2, 3 days, 4 days, pretty soon that editor in your mind is going to dissipate, and you're going to be coming up with ideas. I wouldn't recommend being around your boss during this particular
Right.
But you're going to come up with a lot of ideas, and you're going to find power behind it, and it's going to help you get into that space that is your own. So anyway, it's a really powerful exercise. I just wanted to throw that out to kind of help get to your destination.
Yeah, so MYB community, I think you should definitely take Chris up on that and just take that time. I think that's something to do even as you start your day. Instead of jumping up in the morning and using the bathroom and of course, take your dog out and all that type of thing. But instead of jumping on the social media timelines and all that, as soon as you wake up in the morning, take some time to just do that. Just jot down without the filter and without, that intern or editor. When you say editor, it makes me think, we were joking about old times. It makes me think of the old chief at, the Daily Planet and the Superman cartoons that, just the old rubbish guy that, is going to watch every period and every comma and nail you to the wall for, using, the wrong hyperbole or whatever. So, get that guy out of your head and just jot down thoughts and jot down feelings and things like that. And I think you'll find it'll help springboard you to good days ahead. So listen, Chris Tabish has been our guest today. You can connect with him, MYB, at venturewestgroup.com. That's venturewestgroup.com, as well as Comediology.com. That's Comediology.com. Connect with him there, learn more. And if you want to connect with him, do you want them to email you, Chris, if someone has questions or wants to connect?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you can email Chris. Yeah, email Chris at ctabish, that's CTABISH, at venturewestgroup.com. So MYB, I'd love for you to do that. Chris will let me know if he hears from any of you, but this is what we'd like to bring you is, folks like Chris that are, in the community, they're driving innovation, but they want to see people win. And that's something that's not as common around as it used to be. And so we're glad to have him here on the MYB podcast. Chris, any last words from you or any last thoughts?
Yeah, am I getting paid for this?
Well, you know what? I have to get let me get with my CFO over here. I think he sends out like a penny a minute or something like that. Maybe he does it through Bitcoin. I don't know.
Ron, it has been an awesome pleasure hanging out with you and
your
listeners. And I wish you a fantastic weekend, and thank you again.
Yeah, absolutely. And happy holidays, man, to you and your family. And best wishes to a healthy and prosperous 2020.
Thank you, sir. All right. You too, and let's go in 2020.
There you go. Hey, man, I'll talk to you later, Chris. Appreciate it, buddy.
All right, thanks, bud.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, so that was Chris Tabish. He's the co-founder of Venture West Consulting. He's there in Silicon Valley. So he's a few hours behind where I'm at from a time zone standpoint. So we appreciate him getting up early and jumping on the Minding Your Business podcast. So listen, thank you all so much for your listening ear. Thank you for all your comments. I was able to reply to some people here on Facebook Live and on Spreaker doing double duty. Champ Ron, the Minding Your Business podcast. This was episode 120. Subscribe, like, share with your network. Give us a 5-star rating. 5 stars on Apple Podcasts helps connect the show to more people, and it helps grow our profile. So we appreciate you doing that. Definitely don't forget the mybpodcast.com/shop to get your There's No Business Like Minding Your Own t-shirt. Definitely want you to be able to do that for $19.99. No shipping cost on that. So no shipping at all. So definitely connect there and support the show. Let me know how I can support you, Ron, at themybpodcast.com. Would love to be a resource to your professional endeavors. Listen, have a great rest of your day, a great rest of your week, rest of your weekend. Safe travels to you if you happen to be traveling. And we'll catch you next time on episode number 121 of the Minding Your Business podcast.